Hey y'all, hi. Yay, it's happening. This video is my recap of the year of less stuff. Long awaited, a bit late, but happening. So for my first 3 years on YouTube, I did a project every year. The first year was my no-buy year, the second year was my beauty budget, and the third year was the year of less stuff, but the project went haywire. I mean, the whole year went haywire. And then the project was semi-abandoned. So this is going to be the wrap-up video of that somewhat unwieldy project. I'm going to first briefly recap what happened, so what my plan was, and then why it changed and how it changed. Then I'm going to actually go through the numbers, because part of the plan for the year of less stuff was to count everything at the beginning of the year and then count everything at the end of the year. And then I'm going to talk about my feelings and, you know, the takeaways from the year of less stuff. If this is your first time to my channel, I'm so glad that you're here. My name's Hannah and I love beautiful things, but you know, when you really love beautiful things, especially in this, you know, day and age, in this capitalist society, it's easy to get too many of them. And I feel like that can actually be like a negative feedback loop. Getting too many of them and getting new things all the time can kind of make that love go less far and make there be less of it. So I'm always doing little projects like this, trying to reckon with my desire for beauty and make sure that it actually is nourishing me instead of hurting me. And if that kind of content, that kind of beauty content sounds good to you, I hope you'll subscribe. Let's go ahead now and get into the meat of this video. At the beginning of 2020, I decided that as my New Year's resolution and my channel project, I was going to have a year of less stuff. And the overall goal was pretty simple. I just wanted to end the year with less stuff than I started with, or at the very least, not end the year with more stuff. And my plan was to do this through a combination of gentle decluttering and using my beauty budget for fewer, nicer things instead of buying a whole mess of smaller things. If I didn't receive PR, then the year of less stuff would have been really easy because numerically, I didn't buy very many individual items with my budget. I pretty much managed the brief of buying fewer, nicer things. And I used up a lot of my skincare and a good bit of my makeup. I panned like a good number of things. And I also donated unused and some lightly used beauty products and clothing. It would have been enough just to focus on using up what I had, to donate what I wasn't using, and to buy fewer, nicer things with my budget. I would have easily come out way ahead. But I personally do have to reckon with more than just what I buy. When I really like the things that I receive for free for review, it's tempting to keep them. And at the beginning of 2020, when I started this project, though I had just been receiving PR for 1 year, I was already starting to see how this aspect of my YouTube work could easily cause me to accumulate more and more stuff until my cabinets and closets and drawers were all overflowing. So my year of less stuff wasn't a rejection of stuff altogether. It was a way of keeping myself mindful. I wanted to keep my desire for space and simplicity and fewer, nicer things at the forefront of my mind as I navigated this third year on YouTube, this year of beauty budgeting, of reviews, of PR and replacements, and everything that surrounds both my work on YouTube and my actual just life with my stuff and myself and my face and my body and my joy. I hoped that by accounting for everything, I would create an environment in which I would be more likely to make good decisions about what I bought, about how much I agreed to receive in PR, and about what I ended up ultimately keeping of what came in PR. So as I've said, the only real goal was to not have more stuff at the end of the year than I had at the beginning. And at the beginning of the year, I counted all of it. I was just kind of keeping my actual counting to my personal problem categories, which are also the categories that tend to be directly adjacent to what I'm doing on YouTube. So makeup, skincare, body care, clothing, hair care, accessories, earrings, shoes, those kinds of things, bags, all of the things that were just like mine, my stuff. I didn't extend the count to like the stuff that's in our apartment that Joe and I both use, or my dishes, all of that stuff. I was just keeping it to like my beauty stuff and beauty adjacent stuff. So I counted everything up at the beginning of the year, and my plan was to then circle back and count it at the end of the year. But in the meantime, I started out keeping a loose tally of stuff in and stuff out. I was doing that because I wanted to be able to kind of know how it was going and have materials about which to check in with you guys on YouTube. I wanted to be able to sort of see how much stuff was coming in and how much stuff was going out. I was also hoping that it would change over the course of the year, that at the beginning maybe I would declutter a number of things and acquire some things, but that by the end of the year there would be less intensive decluttering going on, because I didn't want it to be a year of less stuff simply because I got rid of so much stuff that I was like keeping pace with how much stuff I acquired. I wanted it to be that I was truly acquiring fewer, nicer things, and that was why I ended up with less stuff. So that was the plan. But partway through the year, I stopped keeping the tally. I definitely didn't stop thinking about trying to acquire less stuff. I think that by the time we were partway through the year, it was sort of like ingrained in me. It was like a second sense. But I stopped keeping the tally and I stopped checking in consistently about it on YouTube. And that was because my world really turned upside down. Joe and I were thrust into an intense, fast decision-making process about what to do with our small business and then what to do with our lives. And then we had to do all of the things that we decided to do. And for the first 5 or so months of the pandemic, we were quarantined together in our studio apartment on the 6th floor of a building in downtown Los Angeles. And so as all of that unfolded, counting my stuff, it just started to seem almost comically inane. Also, I'd say when we closed our business, my YouTube channel became more central to my life, and it has become more central to my life and more central to our little, family of 2 or of 3 if you count Sadie. And so when that shift happened, I guess you could say I started to become more grateful for all of the things that were coming my way for review, like the things that I got in PR. It felt more useful to me than it had before. It felt more important to me. I felt more grateful for it, more appreciative of it, even though it did sometimes pile up and staying on top of the donations was a whole project. That gratitude and that shift, it mixed up my former kind of strict feelings about the badness of extra stuff, and it mitigated my discomfort with the feeling of sometimes having extra stuff lying around that hasn't yet been dealt with. So already part way through the year, there was a kind of loosening. And then we moved from there to here, and a lot of our stuff, I would say more than half of our shared stuff, way more than half of our shared stuff went into storage. Again, the abstract desire to live with less was shown in a new light. And in that new light, it came off slightly absurd because, again, we're being forced to live without half our stuff right now. Here, there are no closets. So paradoxically, I feel, kind of nomadic because our stuff is being stored and we're here for a while, but we know that it's not permanent. So there's this kind of floating feeling. But at the same time, I kind of struggle to find a place for everything and to keep everything put away. So it's like I have less. My own stuff, most of it isn't here, like my furniture and stuff. Sadie was making trouble at the door. She wanted to come in. But I was saying that, the equation of stuff and space and life has just been completely turned on its head. And I think that now that I have some distance from it, I think that in a sentence, what I can say has happened is that survival, like the literal, actual survival, but also spiritual and emotional survival. Survival has really asserted itself as a priority over curation and perfection, and kind of displaced a lot of what I thought I was doing or what I thought I wanted. So that's what happened. I stopped keeping a monthly tally, but I still wanted to circle back at the end of the year and count all of my stuff. And as I said, a bunch of our stuff is in storage, but my stuff, my shoes, accessories, clothes, makeup, and skincare, body care, all of that stuff is here. So I did it. I went through and counted it just a couple of weeks ago, and I have all the numbers for you. Here is what I found. At the beginning of the year, my stuff number for makeup was 433 individual items. And, many of you will remember that I counted each single eyeshadow as one. I counted each as one piece of makeup, and that ended up accounting for a lot of my stuff number. Yeah, I had over 150 single eyeshadows at the beginning of the year, so that bolstered the number a lot. I also had a lot of little lashes, a lot of brushes, a lot of little tools where you have a whole bunch of little ones. That's why it added up to so much. I was literally counting every single thing. But in single eyeshadows, I did make some cuts. I ended with 117, and I also lost like 10 brushes, a number of lashes. I went through and decluttered my lashes. There were things that I had sort of like a bulk of at the beginning of the year that I realized I didn't need that many of and cut it down. I ended up with less than I started with in the makeup department. I have 373 items of makeup now. I did gain in 2 categories, was it? Lipsticks. So I started out with around 30 lipsticks and I ended the year with almost 50. That's a pretty big leap. Palettes, I went down from 14 to 11. So I have fewer palettes than I started with, and I honestly can't see it getting much bigger than that. I really feel like I want to stick with a number of eyeshadows that I have. There were a lot of the categories I went down from like 8 to 6 or 4 to 2, like magnetic palettes, setting sprays, primers. I went down from 7 to 4 by using them up pretty much entirely. My blush and bronzer collection, that's the other category that grew. I started the year with 14 and I ended up with 26. And you know, if you've been following me this whole year, you'll know that I was aware that I was gaining lipsticks. It's all PR pretty much and review stuff. I just ended up keeping stuff because I love lip products. I did a project at the beginning of the year where I tried living without most of my makeup for a while, like putting it under a desk or, you know, putting it away in a box. And then I thought that I wouldn't miss it. And that when I brought it back out, I would be like, I have so many lipsticks. I can't believe I've been living with all these lipsticks. I'm gonna get rid of them all. But in fact, what happened was that when I brought them out, I was like so excited to see my lipsticks again. And it made me realize that I do get genuine joy from having robust collections of certain specific things. And I'm actually not surprised to see that those things that I really identified as being those things for me this year, which are lipsticks or lip products and blushes, especially cream cheeks, blushes, bronzers, those are the things that I realized this year that I'm finally willing to admit I just love with the passion of 1,000 burning suns, and I'm okay with having like a little bit more than I technically need, or maybe more than most people. I do love eyeshadow, but I definitely feel like I'm at capacity. And from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, I kind of held firm with my line of just wanting a little bit less, wanting fewer palettes, focusing on my singles and yet curating my singles. And that hasn't really changed. I feel like my relationship with eyeshadow, I kind of knew it and I still know it and I know myself and I'm acting accordingly. With lipsticks and blushes, this year I learned that I love them irrationally and I'm okay with allowing that love to sort of, I don't know, thrive within reason. And I feel like it's still within reason. And I'm happy to know that even though I gained so many lipsticks and blushes and bronzers, the amount of my makeup went down because I was being careful to be really reasonable about what I could use and what I would use in all of the other categories across the board. So I feel like these final numbers represent a kind of balance that is what I have been going for. It's not necessarily about paring everything down to its absolute last little serviceable bean. It's about finding the balance that works for you. And this is a balance that works great for me. Less stuff overall, but more blushes and more lipsticks than I had before. I'm here for it. Okay, clothing. Possibly the weirdest and most fascinating accounting that I did when I was like counting everything up. The weirdest and most fascinating outcome comes from literal clothing. So I counted clothing separately from accessories like bags, shoes. Clothing is stuff like short sleeve tops, long sleeve tops, sweaters, pants, dresses, skirts, tango clothes, also bras, underwear, socks, coats, robes, sleepwear, scarves, hats, etc., etc. And it did go down, the numbers did go down in a number of categories, and in a number of these categories it stayed exactly the same. Like literally exactly the same. So I had 2 skirts at the beginning of the year and I ended up with 2 skirts. I had 17 dresses and I ended up with 17 dresses, but that is not because I didn't lose or gain any dresses. I actually let go of a couple of dresses when we moved, donated them, that I knew that I was never really going to wear again. And I bought a couple of dresses towards the end of the year, but it appears that when I counted them, I mean, I looked back at my old video and I said in that video that I had 17 dresses, and I counted them just now and I also had 17. So it appears that I bought exactly the number that I got rid of. I have exactly the same number of pairs of socks as I started the year with. I have one fewer of coats and jackets. I did apparently dramatically declutter my sweaters and sweater dresses. I started the year with 31 and I ended the year with 20 in that category, so that's a lot. I also appear to have dramatically decluttered my my underwear and bras. I started with 28 pairs of underwear and I ended up with 20. I started with 15 bras and I ended up with 11. I did replace a number of bras this year, but it was kind of like a full overhaul and I ended up with fewer. So there are a couple of categories in which I dramatically kind of shrunk the numbers by, 30%, 20%, 40%. And then there are a couple of categories in which I gained stuff. One is long sleeved tops, which is really weird because I remember saying at the end of last year, like, you have enough long sleeve tops, you have more than you need. And I have a couple more pairs of pants than I started with. And I know I did buy a couple pairs of pants at that sample sale in February, so that makes sense to me. But here's the gag, here's the kicker. When I counted it all up, added it all up, I have literally exactly the same number of items of clothing that I started the year with. Exactly. It was 234 at the beginning of the year, and it's 234 now. I was like, exactly the same. It's just bananas. And again, most things stayed the same, but it appears that the number of things that I decluttered in the clothing department this year is exactly the same as the number of things that I ended up either buying or keeping. In the realm of accessories, however, I managed to shrink my stuff number by quite a lot. So my accessories are shoes, tango shoes, bags, earrings, rings, and other jewelry, perfume, and hair accessories. Perfume was a huge one. I remember being completely shocked by how many little perfumes I had, counting all of the little samples, because again, I was counting like every little thing, both at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. I was really counting it all. And so I did a big perfume declutter at the beginning of the year. And then I think I did manage also to use up a couple of perfumes. So for perfume, I started the year with 40 individual little vials and bottles, and I ended the year with 10, and I'm actually about to pan 2 more of them. So I'm really making progress when it comes to my perfume collection. I feel like 10 or fewer is like good for me, so I'm glad to see that. Most of my jewelry and bags and stuff stayed essentially the same. I gave away a bag when I moved, and I have, for some reason, 4 fewer pairs of earrings than I started the year with. I think I might have donated some of them when I moved. I did like a little bit of a purge. Shoes are almost exactly the same. I have 20 pairs of shoes and I started the year with 21. Tango shoes, exactly the same. Started with 9, ended with 9. And I have a few fewer hair accessories than I started with. So most of that stayed pretty much the same, but it came out to a pretty big cut, probably because of specifically the perfume. I started the year with 149 total accessories and I ended up with just 106. So that means that my total clothing, because I was counting, like I was doing like a big overall clothing number that includes clothing and accessories. And so the overall number went down from 383 to 340. What did I say was the biggest gag? The fact that the clothing number was exactly the same. Maybe, but I also feel like this is another big gag. I was worried about my body care and skincare number because skincare is one of the hardest things to keep a lid on in terms of what comes in PR. It goes bad, it's perishable. I feel like overall more than makeup. I mean, some makeup is totally perishable as well, and all makeup is also meant to be used up, you know what I mean? Like it's all kind of perishable, but I feel like a powder blush or something doesn't have the same expiration date stamped on it for me, kind of like mentally in the back of my mind, as like an open bottle of facial serum or something like that, you know? But it takes a long time to use up like a bottle of face oil or face serum, especially if you have many of them going at one time. So at the beginning of the year when I counted it, including the skincare that I had set aside that I hadn't opened yet, but I planned to open, that was in my backups box, which is not what people mean when they say backups box. I think they usually mean they bought backups of their favorite stuff. That's not what it is for me. For me, it's stuff that came in PR that I haven't opened yet because I don't want it to go bad. So the beginning of the year, go bad before I can use it up, right? I'm using up the stuff I have, and then there's like all the stuff that's on deck for testing. At least that's how it used to be. So at the beginning of the year when I counted it all up, I was like, there's all this stuff in my backups box. There are all of these serums and things that are open that are on my vanity, and it added up to quite a lot. I had like 30 skincare products on my vanity that I was in the middle of using. I had 5 hair products on my vanity that I was in the middle of using. I had 16 sheet masks that were like in my drawer that I was planning to use. In the bathroom, in use in the bathroom, 32, is that right? Body care products, right? So I had 32 body care products that were just like open in my bathroom that I was trying to use up. That's like crazy to me. Oh my God. And then I had 4 hair care products and 19 like face skincare products open in the bathroom. That is bananas. I mean, I knew this, like I wrote down all these numbers, but saying it out loud is like a whole thing. And then the backups box, I had 87 things in the backups box. How did I think that I was gonna like test 87 skincare products that were on deck? And why did I think that I needed to have 87 skincare products on deck? Maybe because I felt like I wanted to test them all. I don't know. Whatever the case was, I had 223 products of that kind in my life, open and yet unopened, you know, in my bathroom, my vanity, and in the backups box, 223. And because I have continued to test things have continued to come in PR, I didn't know if I was being mindful enough or giving unopened stuff away enough, or if I'd used up enough stuff to have shrunk that number. When I went to count it, I was genuinely like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I have more than 200 skincare products in use and in my backups box, but I didn't know because I hadn't been continuing to keep the tally. And then what the numbers show is that I dramatically reduced my number of skincare and body care and hair care products. And I know, now that I know the numbers, I know that I'm thinking back and I'm like, how did this happen? I know how it happened. It was through a combination of giving away unopened stuff from my backups box, which I did through donating it, sending it to friends and family. I did quite a lot of that this year. Passing along unopened or just barely tested stuff that came in PR more often than not, which I definitely did do this year because I was still thinking about the year of less stuff, even throughout the second half of the year. And then, you know, really focusing on using up what I owned, which I did do pretty aggressively throughout the entire year. So I currently have about the same number of skincare items in use on my vanity, about the same number of hair care products in use, but my sheet masks, I used up completely. I used up completely this year. And so I had 16 in use, and then I had some in the backups box. Of those 87 things, many of them were sheet masks. I did give a number of sheet masks away, but I really focused on it and I completely used them up. I had so many sheet masks at the beginning of the year. And I think I might even have acquired some in PR this year, but I masked the house down boots. And when I went to count, I realized that I don't have any sheet masks. And then in terms of what's open in the bathroom, like a total about face. At the beginning of the year, I'll tell you again, my embarrassing numbers, 32 body care products, 4 hair care products, and 19 face skincare products. Altogether, that's like close to 60 things that were kicking around in my bathroom. And again, I just want to assure you guys that it wouldn't be like this if it wasn't for PR. I'm not saying that I would be like easily a minimalist in my bathroom if it wasn't for PR. It's just that I didn't buy the majority of that stuff. I mean, really, when it comes to that kind of thing, it's not like I had paid for 60 things that were all like in use at one time in my bathroom. That's like the reality of getting all of this stuff and testing it. And of course, I love getting this stuff and testing it, but 60 things in the bathroom open all at once is too much, right? So my new total is 33 for the entire group, everything. So I slashed in half the number of things that I'm currently kind of like trying to use up that's in my bathroom. 30 is still a lot, but way less than it was at the beginning of the year. And then the backups box, I did some damage. I donated a lot of that stuff, gave a lot of it away. Some of it I opened and continue to use, and I ended the year with around 30 things in that box, even though I had started with close to 90 things. So overall, I went down to having 121 things in the skincare, body care, hair care department. And that also includes little like tools, what I use to dye my eyebrows, and like little scissors that I keep around for cutting my hair. It includes absolutely every little item. So this has been like a whole thing. My makeup total went from 431 down to 373. My clothes and accessories total went from 383 down to 340. And my total skincare and body care number went from 223 down to 121. So I lost stuff all around. The full total went from over 1,000, it was 1,037 at the beginning of the year, down to around 800. In the most blatant terms, I did successfully execute the year of less stuff. What matters more than the blatant terms? What matters more than the numbers? My feelings about everything, and whether I feel like whether the mental, emotional, spiritual journey, the journey of self-knowledge was a success, that's actually what I care about much, much more. So let's move into phase 3 of the video. Let's talk about feelings. And here's the thing, the gag of the video, the actual gag of the video. In order to get the information that I just used, the numbers, my beginning of the year numbers, I had to go back and watch my videos from the beginning of the year, which I never do. Y'all, I am not one of these people who's out here watching her old videos. I never watch them, and I don't like thinking about them. But I had to go back and watch the beginning of the year videos because I lost the papers that I was using to, like the paper that I wrote down the numbers on, which is classic pandemic Hannah behavior. And what I mean by that is that that's something I would never have done. Like I would never have lost the papers that I was using to write down, to keep this year-long project, to keep a tally. I would never, before the pandemic, have lost those papers, but I just have a different capacity. I have a different capacity for organization and for keeping track of things right now. I mean, it's been going on for long enough that I've come to accept it, but it really threw me for a loop for the first several months. But this is classic, losing a thing that misplacing a thing that I needed for a future video, for a future reckoning, that I had been like carefully keeping track of all year and like using to tally. And then like it comes time to do it and I'm like, where is it? And I look everywhere and I can't find it. That's basically what it's been like. But it wasn't all bad that I had to go back and watch my pre-pandemic self talking excitedly about this project. It was very, very weird. It was weird to watch myself in my old apartment, all fired up, like just very carefree. I felt watching it. It was like I was watching a video of myself from 10 years ago. And I just kept thinking, life just never goes how you think it's going to, does it? And I mean, that's old news right now for all of us alive on Earth this year. But it really drove it home in like a super fundamental and personal way. And watching myself also gave me the opportunity to kind of like suss out where I was at the beginning of the year with this project. Maybe gave me some more access to that than I would have had if I had just like just sat down and tried to remember why I did the project. I could see myself in those videos torn between a desire for like controlled spaciousness and controlled clarity of like my management with my beautiful things, torn between that and a real appreciation for PR, like being on the receiving end of free stuff to test, how much money it saves me, and how much it kind of like makes it easy to produce certain kinds of content, to produce more content, and how much it can actually be a source of joy. I'm still torn between those two poles. I'm just so much less torn up about it. I'm so much less angsty over it. It's like on the one hand, there's the desire for space and the aesthetic ideal of minimalism and the way that that kind of gets in amongst me and sort of tickles my sense of morality a little bit. There's that. And then on the other hand, there's acceptance of my actual situation, which is both that I receive PR as an influencer to make my content and to save me money, and that I'm now living in Julia and Oliver's dining room with no closets and trying to run a YouTube channel from here and don't really know where I'm gonna go next and half my stuff is in storage, right? So there's like this desire for clarity and spaciousness, and then there's my actual situation and like accepting my actual situation. All of that's here, it's all here. I just feel a lot less stressed about it now than that Hannah that I saw in those videos from the beginning of the year. And I also feel a lot less pressure to completely unpack every aspect of that situation every time I make content that relates to it in any way. So takeaways, I did want to address the fact that some people responded really badly to the incorporation of counting into this project. Like people really hated that I was counting stuff. They felt like it was obsessive or that it was like missing the point. But I maintain that counting can be very interesting if it's incorporated as part of like a balanced larger understanding of what you're doing. I still think that there's something to be learned from it. And in fact, when I went back and watched myself from the beginning of the year, I was struck by the fact that many times I referenced or reinforced the fact that the counting that I was doing was just a tool, just a means to an end, and wasn't actually the central focus of the project. I knew that at the beginning, I've known it the whole time. And even though many people expressed relief when I abandoned the counting part of the project partway through the year, I want to tell you guys that I actually feel like the counting really did something for me. I feel like it did assist me in my larger goal. And it didn't feel obsessive or unrelated or like distracting for me because I knew from the very beginning that it was just a tool. I was worried that it would be like really cringy watching myself back and that I would see my past self as having been kind of misguided, but I actually didn't feel that way. And I do feel like counting my stuff at the beginning of the year taught me how much stuff doesn't feel like stuff. You know what I mean? Like it really made me think. It like gave me a new lens through which to look at my stuff and the acquisition of stuff, and then keeping track of it, tallying the stuff in and stuff out for the first several months of the year. It taught me very thoroughly how fast stuff adds up and how much more stuff is than you think it is. And actually, even though I abandoned the tallying partway through the year, and I'm glad that I did because again, it was becoming kind of an inane feeling to continue to do it. But I think that the fact that I did do it for the first half of the year is why. I think that the lessons that I learned, the kind of awareness, like the sort of increased sensitivity to stuff in and stuff out and the knowledge of how much more it was probably adding up to than I knew. I think that those lessons that I learned from the tallying in the beginning of the year are probably responsible for the mindset that I was able to maintain for the rest of the year, possibly responsible entirely for the fact that I ended the year with measurably less stuff than I started with. I mean, I ended the year with 20% less stuff than I started with, in spite of the fact that I did spend my budget on some stuff and acquire some things that way, and in spite of the fact that I did keep some of the beautiful things that came in PR. So now I'm thinking about the future. Here's the thing. My 20% reduction in my stuff from this past year, 2020, it's partly because I purged, you know what I mean? I kind of lightly purged. I donated a bunch of unopened stuff or lightly used stuff. I made a concerted effort to use up stuff that was on its last legs or stuff that I knew that I had the capacity to use up. I panned some makeup. I gave away stuff that I was never going to use. I gave stuff away to friends. I donated some gently used clothing, and I donated some clothing that I really loved, but that I was pretty sure that I was never going to wear again. I was trying to make sure that I didn't drag things with me into 2021 that I really didn't think that I was going to cherish or use going forward. So it's partly because of that, but it's also in large part because my shopping profile in 2020 was that of one who spends her budget on fewer, nicer things. I brought measurably fewer individual things, measurably fewer items into my life by buying them in 2020 than I have in past years, with the exception, of course, of my no-buy year. And, if it weren't for PR, I think that probably my stuff number, because of the combination of those two factors, the purging and only buying fewer, nicer things, If it weren't for PR, I think my stuff number would have gone down by way more than it did. So here's what I've been saying to myself as I think about the future. You can't keep purging forever. Or if you do, it's because you're constantly replenishing your stuff. You know what I mean? If you're constantly buying lots of new stuff, then yes, you can keep purging forever. But I don't want to be doing that. I don't want to constantly replenish my stuff and then purge and purge and purge forever. Free stuff will come to me. Sometimes, depending on the time of year, it will come to me in largish quantities. And I'm making sure that when it leaves me, it goes to a good home or to a good cause. But for everything that's not PR, like not beauty channel related, the stuff that I bought for myself in the past or the stuff that I might buy for myself this year, my stuff, I don't want to be constantly getting rid of it. So here's what I've been thinking, PR aside, in order for me to not be constantly getting rid of my stuff, constantly purging, like how can I make sure that I'm not? You know what I mean? Like that's what I've been thinking. And I made a little list of principles and strategies for that. And I'm going to tell you what the list is. So number one, when buying stuff, be realistic about what you will continue to love. And this is hard, right? It requires knowing yourself really well. It requires some soul searching. It really requires being honest with yourself. And I feel like I've been doing that searching and getting to know myself better over the course of these past several years. And now it's just a matter of putting that knowledge in action instead of giving into the temptation to just buy a thing kind of on a whim. I would really like to make sure that when I buy something, I've thought about it up, down, and all around town and applied all of my self-knowledge to the best of my ability. Of course, there is a limit to that. But I would like to the best of my ability, ensure that I will continue to love it, that I won't get tired of it, that it is something that will really fit with me and that I will cherish for many years to come. I would like that to be a principle of my personal shopping behavior. Principle number two, buying high quality stuff so that it doesn't get worn out quickly. And this doesn't have to always mean like spending a lot of money on stuff, especially if you buy things secondhand, which I do a lot when it comes to clothing. At this point, I can't say exclusively, but maybe close to, like a large percentage of the clothing items that I purchase are secondhand. But there's a big difference, I think, whether you're purchasing it new or secondhand, between buying something that's made out of quality materials that will last for a really long time and won't get kind of grody and worn out, and buying something that's cheaply made, that's made out of materials that will really lose their luster quickly or actually physically fall apart. Because that second category of stuff, that stuff that I just know from experience, I'm going to end up getting rid of down the line much, much sooner than I'll have to get rid of something that's in the first category, something that's really beautifully made. It's not always possible to buy high quality stuff. I mean, it's not always possible to buy the top quality version of the thing that you're buying. It's just not. But for me, it's important to have it here as one of these principles. There's so much, it's like not just fast fashion, but fast like stuff on this planet right now that's kind of appealing, you know what I mean? Because a lot of times it has the appearance that you want and maybe is semi-functional in the way that you want, and it costs way, way less than better made stuff. It's just constantly tempting to go against this principle of buying high quality stuff so specifically so that it won't get worn out quickly. And it's just something that I'd like to remember. Principle number three, take good care of the thing. You know, I feel like I could do better at this with my makeup. I feel that I don't always keep it clean. I don't always keep it organized. I am actually making an effort already this year to do better at that. But I think this really applies to stuff like clothing and shoes, you know, washing it gently, washing it in the right way, doing things like deep hilling if you need to, taking the time, folding it, keeping it hung up properly. You know what I mean? Like keeping it properly so that it retains its best qualities. And being okay with the time that it takes. I think it's so funny. It's like, I feel like I'll put a lot of energy into making sure that I pick a really nice thing, and then I begrudge the time that it takes to take care of that thing sometimes. I'd like to shift my thinking around that and think of the time that it takes to, again, like carefully wash something or deep pill it or hang it properly or always put it away after I've worn it or used it. that time is a kind of non-monetary investment in the longevity of my beautiful things. The next principle on the list is to use up perishable things instead of just letting them lag and lag and lag. Use them up. And, part of this is trying not to own or have open more at any given time than I can actually manage to use up. This one is, for me, PR is the biggest challenge to this. This wouldn't be as big of a challenge if I wasn't, doing this work, but it's still something that I can try to do. You know what I mean? It's still a principle that I can try to adhere to. Ooh, and this one, the second to last one on the list, fight the urge to lose interest in something or devalue it to yourself when it's no longer new. And it's when I was making this list and this one popped out of me, right? Fighting the urge to lose interest in something when it's no longer new. It was sort of like a bolt from the blue because I realized that a lot of my content on YouTube, it's basically like tactics for this. The advent calendar, doing the week of doing the most, where I was like, or 2 weeks of doing the most with my outfits. When I hid all of my makeup in a box and didn't use it for a couple of weeks, and then I took it out and was reunited with it, or being inspired by a makeup artist to use my same makeup in a different way, like those kinds of things. I'm always talking about it, like going deeper into what you own, reinventing what you own. All of those tactics are ways of doing this thing, ways of fighting the urge to lose interest in your stuff just because it's no longer new. And the other thing that I thought of when I put this on the list is like, where does that urge come from? I think that urge, the urge to lose interest, the instinct to not value something when it's no longer new, I think that urge is being kind of bred in us or like pushed on us by this digital world, the cycle of new releases, the cycle of trends and fashions always turning over, the anxiety about not being good enough, not looking good enough, not having good enough stuff. All of that is like contributing to create this feeling that stuff loses its luster really, really quickly once you've owned it for a little while. I don't think we're to be blamed for having that feeling. You know what I mean? I think it's really normal that we feel that way. I think that it's a fact of life that there's like an urge to allow something to not be interesting, to lose interest in something, or there's like an instinct to devalue something when it's no longer new. It's something that we're dealing with, and it's good to acknowledge that. That's like something that corporations want us to have. And so the thing on my list here is to see it, acknowledge it, and then just fight it. Like use tactics to push back against it. Use tricks and tips and self-knowledge to actively fall back in love over and over again with all of my old stuff that I already have. So that's on the list. And it leads right into the last thing on the list, which is to make friends with wearing and using the same stuff over and over again. Get into it. I want to get into it. I want to get into wearing and using the same stuff, wearing my same outfits over and over again, my same clothes, wearing my same makeup over and over again. I want to make friends, make lovers of using and wearing the same stuff over and over again. Make it me, make it fashion, make it my life that I do that. So that's the list. I'll read it to you again really quickly. When buying, be realistic about what you'll continue to love. Buy high quality stuff so that it doesn't get worn out quickly. Take good care of it and be okay with the time that it takes to take good care of it. Use up perishable products and don't own more than you can use up at any given time. Fight the urge to lose interest in something because it is no longer new, and make friends with wearing and using the same stuff over and over again. So thinking about the future, at the end of the year of less stuff, that's the list that I dashed off for myself, and I effing love it. And I think that I'm going to print it out. I'll also put it in the description box or something below, like so you can, copy paste it if you want to. I think that I'm going to print it out and post it somewhere. And this is the gag of the video. The year of less stuff has given me all of these takeaways in this way, this concrete way of thinking about what I want for myself, an actionable list. You know what I mean? That it's given me, even though it went tits up, even though it went so haywire and the entire year went so haywire, and I kind of felt like the project had fizzled out. In terms of takeaways, in terms of growth, I actually don't think that it fizzled out. So that's that's it. That's my probably incredibly long, meandering recap of the year of less stuff, the lessons that it taught me, and all my feelings. And I really, really appreciate the few of you who have stuck it out to the end on this one. I hope you will leave a comment if you have something to comment. I hope you will give this video a little thumbs up. And I really, really hope that you are remembering to take extra good care of yourself, because that's what'll make you the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.